In this example, we're going to look at how to use SPSS to estimate a simple linear regression model using data from the 2012 General Social Survey. And again, we're going to look at the relationship between education and father's education. So in order to estimate a regression model, we just go to Analyze, Regression, and then Linear. And we have to type in our dependent variable and our independent variable by finding them in the list here and then just highlighting them and moving them over. So education is going to be our dependent variable, father's education is going to be our independent variable, and we're just going to click OK and zoom out, and SPSS will create a set of tables showing us our regression results. Okay, so let's first take a look at this part of the results. We see here that the R-square value is equal to 0.213, and that tells us that about 21% of the variation in the dependent variable, more specifically 21.3% of the variation, is explained by the independent variable. Put differently, about 21% of the variation in education is explained by father's education. Now, why is that value so low? Well, there's several other factors that explain education other than just father's education. For example, things like age, wealth, race, sex, and so on that we don't account for in our model. So here we're explaining about 20% of the variation, and we would say that's sort of on the low end of model fit. So remember, R square ranges from 0 to 1. The closer it is to 1, the worse the model fit, and the closer it is to 1, the better the model fit. Now, what about our actual regression results? So looking down here, we see that we have another table where we have coefficients, and right next to where it says constant, we have a value of 10.146, and so that's the intercept. And so that tells us basically for someone whose father's education is 0, their predicted level of education is 10 years. And then we have below that, highest year school completed father, that's the regression slope of the effect for father's education. And so that tells us that for a unit increase in father's education or a year increase in every year for the father's education, it's predicted that the respondent will gain an additional approximately a third of a year of education, so 0.33 if we round it. And so every time the father's education is increased by a year, it's predicted that the response education will increase by about a third of a year. Now, we could do the same analysis in PSPP. And so, again, we do the same thing. We just go to Analyze, Regression. Let me zoom in there. Analyze, Regression. Whoops. Let's try that again. Analyze, Regression, Linear. And we just type in our independent and dependent variables. Remember that the independent variable is father's education, and the dependent variable is education. So I'm going to move education here, father's education here, and we'll click OK, and PSPP will make the same tables that SPSS made. We just have to go to our output window, and if we zoom in, we see that we get the same values that SPSS gave us. So R square of about 0.21 or 21% of the variation in the dependent variable is explained by the independent variable. We have an intercept of 10.15 and a slope of 0.33. And so we get the same results whether we use PSPP or SPSS, and either one's fine in this case.